Lucy, a young waitress, worked at a small diner in New York. Life had never been easy for her. She had lost her parents at a young age and was now responsible for taking care of her little brother. Despite low wages, long shifts, and demanding customers, she always remained kind and cheerful. One night, as the diner was about to close, Lucy noticed an old man standing outside. His clothes were tattered, his hair unkempt, and his face carried the weight of years of hardship. He seemed to be looking toward the trash can, possibly searching for food. A pang of sympathy struck Lucy's heart. Without hesitation, she gathered some leftover food from a table and took it to the kitchen, arranging it neatly on a clean plate. As she approached the door, the old man was about to turn away. "Wait!" Lucy called out with a warm smile. "Here, take this. You must be hungry." The old man looked at her in disbelief, as if kindness was something he had long forgotten. Tears welled up in his eyes. "You're an angel, dear," he whispered, accepting the plate with trembling hands. Lucy simply nodded and smiled, unaware that the man standing before her was not just any homeless person, and that this seemingly ordinary night was about to change her life forever. As Lucy returned inside, she felt a few stares from the other staff. Her manager, Mr. Davis, a strict and profit-driven man, had noticed her actions. "Lucy," he called out sharply, "did you just give away free food?" She swallowed hard. "It was just leftovers, sir." He looked hungry. Mr. Davis sighed, rubbing his temples. "This is a business, not a charity. If I catch you doing that again, you'll lose your job. Got it?" Lucy nodded, biting her lip to hold back her frustration. She didn't understand why kindness was such a problem. Meanwhile, at a corner table, a customer had been observing the scene. He was dressed in simple clothes, a hat casting a shadow over his face. He sipped his coffee slowly, deep in thought. Outside, the homeless man, whom Lucy had unknowingly helped, finished his meal and glanced back at the diner. His eyes, filled with gratitude, lingered on Lucy before he walked away into the night. The next evening, he returned. This time, he didn't hesitate. He walked into the diner and sat at a table near the window. Lucy, noticing him, approached with a warm smile. "Back again?" The man nodded. "Yes. And I'd like to order something today." Surprised, Lucy handed him a menu. "Take your time." She had no idea that this simple act of kindness was setting the stage for something far bigger than she could imagine. Lucy watched as the homeless man studied the menu carefully. His fingers traced over the words as if he hadn't held a menu in years. "I'll take the special," he finally said, looking up at her. She blinked, momentarily surprised. "Are you sure? It's a little pricey." He simply nodded. "I can pay." Still puzzled, Lucy took his order and walked toward the kitchen. Meanwhile, other customers began to whisper. A few regulars glanced at him with disdain. "What's he doing in here?" a woman muttered, "probably looking for another handout." Another scoffed. Lucy overheard their words and clenched her fists. It wasn't fair. Why did people assume the worst just because someone looked different? She brought the man his food, setting the plate in front of him with a smile. "Enjoy." "Thank you, Lucy," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. She paused. "How do you know my name?" He chuckled lightly. "It's on your name tag." Lucy laughed, relieved. "Right, of course." As he ate, the whispers grew louder. Finally, Mr. Davis approached, arms crossed. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave after you're done eating. We don't want any trouble." The man met his gaze calmly. "I understand." Lucy's stomach tightened. Something about this didn't feel right. The man wasn't causing trouble, so why was everyone so quick to judge him? What she didn't know was that her kindness had already set something in motion. This man was far more than he appeared to be, and soon, everyone would find out. Lucy couldn't shake the uneasy feeling as she watched the homeless man eat his meal in silence. The other customers continued to cast judgmental glances his way, but he seemed completely unfazed. When he was finished, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. Lucy noticed his hands were rough, calloused, as if they had known years of hard labor. "Keep the change," he said softly, placing the money on the table. Lucy hesitated. It wasn't much, just a few dollars, but she knew how rare it was for someone in his situation to pay for a full meal. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. He gave her a small smile. "You've already done enough for me. Consider it a thank you." Lucy felt a lump in her throat. The world was so quick to assume the worst about people like him, yet here he was, trying to give what little he had. As he stood to leave, a couple at a nearby table scoffed. "What a joke," the man muttered under his breath. "Probably stole that money." Lucy turned sharply. "That's enough," she said, her voice firm. The couple looked at her in shock, but she didn't care. The homeless man gave her a knowing look. "Not everyone would stand up for someone like me," he said. She shrugged. "Maybe they should." As he walked toward the door, Lucy felt an odd sense of finality, as if she wouldn't see him again, but she was wrong. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The next time he walked into the diner, he wouldn't look homeless at all. A few days had passed since Lucy last saw the homeless man. Though she tried to push the encounter from her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if he was okay. Had he found a warm place to sleep? Was he eating enough? The lunch rush had just settled when the diner doors swung open. Lucy turned instinctively, expecting to see another regular, but what she saw nearly made her drop the tray in her hands. A man in an expensive navy blue suit stepped inside. His polished shoes clicked against the tiled floor, and his neatly trimmed beard made him look dignified, powerful. His presence commanded attention, and soon, all eyes were on him. Lucy felt a strange sense of familiarity, but she couldn't place it. Then, the man turned, his piercing eyes meeting hers. Her breath hitched. It was him. Gone were the ragged clothes, the unkempt hair, and the exhausted look in his eyes. Instead, he looked wealthy. Important. Lucy's heart pounded in confusion. As he walked toward the counter, the manager, Mr. Jenkins, practically tripped over himself to greet him. "Welcome, sir. What can we do for you today?" The man smiled slightly, but his eyes never left Lucy. "I'd like to speak to the waitress who helped me a few nights ago." A hush fell over the diner. Lucy swallowed hard. She had no idea what was happening, but something told her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. Lucy's hands trembled as she stepped forward. Every eye in the diner was on her, from curious customers to her shocked coworkers. She had no idea what was happening, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this man, this mysterious, wealthy-looking man, was about to change everything. "You wanted to speak to me?" she asked hesitantly. The man nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes. But first, allow me to introduce myself properly." He extended a hand. "My name is James Whitmore." Lucy blinked. That name sounded oddly familiar. She shook his hand cautiously, still unsure of what to make of the situation. Her manager, Mr. Jenkins, suddenly gasped. "Wait, James Whitmore? As in Whitmore Enterprises?" Murmurs spread through the diner like wildfire. People whispered excitedly, some pulling out their phones as they realized who was standing before them. Lucy felt her heart race. Whitmore Enterprises was one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. Their CEO, James Whitmore, was a billionaire known for his philanthropy and business empire. But that made no sense. Why had he been disguised as a homeless man? "I don't understand," Lucy said slowly. "Why were you?" James smiled, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I had my reasons. But before we get into that, I want to say something important." He turned to Mr. Jenkins, his expression serious. "This young woman," James said, gesturing to Lucy, "showed kindness when she had no reason to. She didn't know who I was, and yet she helped me without expecting anything in return." Lucy's eyes widened as James continued, "And now, I'd like to return the favor." The entire diner fell silent, waiting for his next words. Lucy stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. Just minutes ago, she was a struggling waitress trying to make ends meet. Now, a billionaire was standing in front of her, praising her in front of everyone. James Whitmore smiled at her warmly. "Lucy, I came here disguised as a homeless man to see how people would treat me when they thought I had nothing. Most people ignored me. Some treated me poorly. But you? He paused. You showed kindness. You gave without expecting anything in return. Lucy swallowed hard, unable to find the right words. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. I own several businesses, including some of the finest restaurants in the country. I'm always looking for people with a strong work ethic and a good heart. He extended the card toward her. I'd like to offer you a position, something far better than waitressing here, he said, glancing around the tiny diner. How would you feel about working in one of my luxury restaurants? With a real salary, benefits, and a future? A stunned silence filled the room. Lucy's manager, Mr. Jenkins, paled. The other waitresses exchanged shocked glances. Lucy's hands trembled as she reached for the card. You're serious? Henry tilted his head slightly. Rules, Miss Thornton? Or personal biases? His tone was calm, but the power behind his words was undeniable. The students murmured amongst themselves. They had all seen Miss Thornton's treatment of Daniel, how she singled him out, how she dismissed his intelligence. And now, for the first time, she was being held accountable. Principal Edwards cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take this discussion to my office, he suggested, attempting to regain control of the situation. Henry, however, shook his head. No. This is something that needs to be addressed here, in front of the students who witnessed it. He turned to Miss Thornton. Tell me, do you believe my grandson is less capable than his classmates simply because he comes from a farming background? Miss Thornton hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. No, of course not, she said quickly. Henry's expression didn't change. Then why was he treated as if he didn't belong here? The silence that followed was deafening. Miss Thornton looked away, suddenly unable to meet Daniel's eyes. Daniel, standing beside his grandfather, took a deep breath. Miss Thornton, I don't need you to like me, he said, his voice steady. I don't even need you to apologize. But I do need you to understand that where I come from doesn't make me any less of a student. The weight of his words seemed to sink in. Miss Thornton's shoulders slumped ever so slightly. I understand, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry nodded, satisfied. Good. Because respect isn't about wealth or status. It's about character. The students exchanged glances, absorbing the moment. Many had never seen someone stand up to Miss Thornton before. And now, thanks to Daniel and his grandfather, they were seeing change unfold before their eyes. Principal Edwards exhaled sharply. Miss Thornton, I believe we need to review your teaching approach, he said, his tone firmer now. And as for Daniel, his expulsion is revoked, effective immediately. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. Daniel had won, not through wealth, but through dignity. Henry placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. Come on, Daniel. You've got a class to get back to. As they turned toward the school doors, the students erupted into applause. Daniel walked back inside, his head held high, not because of his grandfather's influence, but because he had proven that respect was something earned, not given. As Daniel stepped back into the classroom, a hush fell over the students. Every eye was on him. Some looked impressed, others ashamed, and a few, like Sarah and Louise, smiled in quiet support. Miss Thornton stood stiffly at the front, her usual stern demeanor now replaced with something more uncertain. Daniel made his way to his seat, his heart pounding. He had fought to be here, and now, he was going to prove that he belonged, not because of his grandfather's wealth, but because he deserved it. Ms. Thornton cleared her throat. All right, class, let's resume the lesson. Her voice lacked its usual confidence, and for once, she didn't single Daniel out. Instead, she simply continued teaching, treating him like any other student. During lunch, students flocked around Daniel, bombarding him with questions. Dude, your grandfather is seriously cool, one boy said. I can't believe a helicopter landed at our school, another added. Sarah nudged Daniel. You really stood up for yourself. That was amazing. Daniel smiled, but his mind was still spinning. This morning, he had been expelled. Now, he was being treated like a hero. Across the cafeteria, Miss Thornton sat alone at her usual table. She picked at her food, lost in thought. It was clear that today had shaken her. Meanwhile, Principal Edwards sat in his office, staring at his desk. The weight of what had happened still hung over him. He had almost let a talented student be expelled because of an outdated bias. That couldn't happen again. By the time the final bell rang, Daniel felt lighter. He had come to school that morning thinking he had lost everything. Now, he realized he had gained something even more valuable, respect. As he walked outside, the helicopter was gone, but his grandfather's words stayed with him. Respect isn't about wealth or status. It's about character. Daniel knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, Daniel walked into school with his head held high. The stares hadn't stopped, but now they carried curiosity and, in some cases, admiration. Even students who had never spoken to him before nodded in acknowledgement. As he reached his locker, Louise and Sarah joined him. "You really shook things up, man," Louise said with a grin. Thornton didn't even glare at anyone in first period. "It's like she's scared now." Sarah smirked. "Or maybe she finally learned what respect means." Lucy smiled warmly. "Trust me, I know what it's like to need a little help. Just pay it forward when you can." As she walked away, she realized she had come full circle. From a struggling waitress to a woman who could change lives, and it had all started with a single act of kindness. This story proves that kindness has the power to change lives in ways we never expect. What would you do if you were in Lucy's shoes? Let us know in the comments. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. And remember, small acts of kindness can lead to incredible transformations. Stay kind. Stay hopeful. See you in the next one.